Coming up on your favorite podcast, it is the Football Pod. It is back. It's a Saturday night, which is not normal for us. But with the Thanksgiving week, we had to push things back a little bit. And on top of that, we're playing a man down. No Ryan tonight, at least as far as we know, out with a little bit of an injury / illness, maybe / sadness over the Buckeyes loss today. So Zach and I will just cover the next hour, talking a little NFL action, and also dip into some college stuff today. Obviously, Michigan beating Ohio State was big news. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about how much we hate the overtime format, and then get into some news around the NFL as we head in to the home stretch of the NFL season. It's got a long way to go until we get to the final end, but our fantasy football seasons are coming to a close soon. We got a lot to get to. So Zach and I will entertain you here over the next hour or so. So sit with us, and we will enjoy it. Here's the pod next.
Welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket out.
Hey, it's the Tim Anderson Podcast. I'm Tim, and that is my buddy Zach over there at his palatial manor just a few miles up the road from me. Zachary, hope you had a lovely Thanksgiving. Good to have you here.
Good to be here, Tim. Thanksgiving was good.
Good, I'm glad. Family get out, do stuff, or did you travel, or did they come to you? How did that work?
We went to my parents, which is, they're closer to me than you are.
That's true.
In terms of distance.
You could probably walk over there. That's probably good.
Yeah. So we made it down the road, ate more than our fill, and then Caitlin was off for hockey for the weekend, so she was out of town. And
yeah, a lot of hockey teams traveling this weekend. I noticed that. A lot of our girls team went up and did the Moorhead War Road loop this weekend. I mean, I'm like, my goodness, that's a lot of that is some window time right there.
They were in Grand Rapids this weekend.
Oh, God.
So they met Hibbing there on Friday and then played Grand Rapids today.
That's, do you want to talk about getting your non-conference in early, not screwing around? The girls' hockey teams are out early and getting the mileage in quickly. But that's good. Good for everybody. Hopefully Caitlin had a good trip. That's nice. Let's chat. No Ryan tonight. We need to probably specify that. First of all, let's update. We're recording on a Saturday, which is not when we normally record. We record usually on Wednesday nights, sometimes Thursday nights, and it'll be Thursday nights again after this week. I'll be willing to go back to that. Just have to get this one last stilly thing out of our way. But Saturday night, we've already had NFL games that have been played this week. We've had a lot of college today. No Ryan. He is convalescing and recovering from various bugs and illnesses, but you think it's something else.
Well, Ryan is very much like Herb. Once Ohio State loses, their health comes into question, and
got to spend more time.
He's
got to spend more time with his family. He said, "I got to spend more time with the wife tonight. I got to get away from it all." So Ryan's out tonight, but we hope Ryan feels better, and we hope that he comes up with a really solid excuse and joins us on the pod next week to defend Ryan Day and to defend the Ohio State Buckeyes after their it was a good game. It was a good game for 3 quarters, but the Wolverines beat them up.
Yeah, they out-physicaled them, and they had nearly 300 yards on the ground. And, Ryan's been pretty contrite on Twitter so far today.
Could that be the stomach flu talking?
Well, I told you guys before the game, it felt like it was coming, right? It felt like Michigan, with all the stuff going on in the stadium when I was watching, and I haven't seen the games earlier in the year and the weather. And so I texted you guys and said I'm thinking upset today. And I tell you, not more than 2 minutes later, my brother texted me and he's like, "Man, Ohio State +7 or -7.5 feels like free money." And I was like, well, if you're feeling that way. So I took Michigan and the points, with the caveat that if Michigan won straight up, he had to pay double.
Ooh.
So it was a nice cash in. I'll be collecting when we make our way down to the Royal Rumble.
That tells me that Zach's best bets are looking to make a comeback here, and that you're feeling a little bit better about your gambling eye.
I tell you, the weather, a physical team in the cold versus a finesse team. And it did, right. It really felt like if Harbaugh didn't get this one, then what happens? So, yeah, I had that good feeling this morning, kind of like that day I told you that the Jets were going to win.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it's good for Harbaugh because I think he was really starting to get a bad rap here. And it's like, if you look at his win-loss record and what he's accomplished at Michigan, he's done pretty well there as the head coach. And he is a good football coach. And he needed this win, though. He needed it for validation purposes. I think he needed it for maybe to regain some of that lost credibility that had kind of been there. This was a big one for him.
I tell you, the other side of the coin, too, is Ohio State needs them to be good.
Right.
Ohio State needs a number 2 in the conference. Otherwise, because it was starting to turn into kind of the Clemson issue where, there's just not a lot of big wins for Clemson in the ACC. And so, yes, the Big Ten has been better this year, right? And various teams have been ranked high. But I don't think that we look at any of those teams as world beaters, right? I mean, we weren't thinking that with Michigan State. We didn't think that way with Iowa. Even Iowa got up to number 2, and that was, I'm an Iowa proponent, and I think they're always underrated, but 2 is way overrated.
Agreed. Yeah.
And so, but they need another team that's good in the conference with them.
Yeah, and that's what Alabama was feeling there for a little while. It seemed like it was a revolving door for Alabama in the SEC. Now Georgia seems like they've sort of cemented themselves as that chief rival to them, and that's you're right, it's good for everybody. It's good for business, and it's good for that rivalry. That it doesn't really become a rivalry if one side just wins all the time. That's kind of the importance of like the Gophers winning the Axe occasionally, like having won it now 2 of the last 4 years or whatever it is, like having that is like, now that game matters. It feels like it's worth something, and that's a good thing.
It is. You want those games at the end to matter. I mean, and we're both watching Bedlam right now with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, and it matters. But the dumb thing is that if Oklahoma wins, they play again next week.
Which I guess I guess it's cool to get a rematch 2 weeks in a row. I don't know, but it's my first time really taking in college football in a couple weeks. I kind of enjoyed the day today. It was sort of a nice change of pace from – been watching a lot of college football the last 2 days. A nice change of pace from the NFL a little bit. But there's still things that drive you absolutely insane. The game still takes way too long. Even when they're running the ball like Michigan was running it, the game took 3.5 hours to play today. Super long game. And the overtime rules that we saw in Alabama-Auburn, just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, the fact that the whole season comes down, I mean, really, the whole season was coming down at that point for Alabama to a bunch of 2-point plays. Because if they lose, they're done. I think even if they beat Georgia, I don't think they're getting in.
Yeah.
With 2 other losses. And so, yeah, the rules are dumb. Also, the targeting.
Yeah, the targeting thing has to be addressed. I think there's 2 rules that have to be addressed somehow. One in college football, one in the pros, right? And targeting is the one in college. Because if an offensive player lowers their head into the defensive player and catches the defensive player's helmet, it's targeting is basically what they've called it. And there's sometimes I don't know what a defensive player can do.
Yeah, they're the one on the first play of the Gopher game today.
Yeah.
I mean, the wide receiver catches the ball and dips down, and the DB comes in and whacks him, and he even goes shoulder to head. It wasn't helmet to helmet; it was the shoulder to the helmet. But it's like the guy dropped. What is he supposed to do?
And I understand, and the receiver dropping their head. I don't blame them for doing that because that feels natural. It feels instinctual. Maybe it's not the right thing to do, but I feel like if I'm catching a ball and I'm going to get hit, I'm bracing myself for impact. And so I make myself smaller than I probably – I mean, it feels like a natural instinctive move, but now it feels like it's punishing defensive players just unfairly.
Yeah, it's a terrible rule.
And the other rule that we'll get into here at the NFL, I got one more thing with college, but I want to touch on this a little bit. Because, again, I'm not a blame the officials guy, but I am an understanding of the rules guy. Like, I think the PI – we've got the NFL does have to address – they're calling the penalty right. I think they need to change how it's called. Because it feels like now it's too easy for teams to just throw a ball up deep and throw it short, like throw it 10 yards short of the target on purpose, and basically have the wide receiver get corralled by the defensive back. There's nothing the D-back can do. Like, I feel like that play is happening a lot now.
Yeah, the underthrown ball.
Yeah, exactly.
By the rules, probably should be addressed as uncatchable.
Yeah.
But it's hard to call a ball uncatchable when there's pass interference.
Right. So it's a challenge that they have, and I don't believe, like, everybody's like, well, 28 penalties, what a horrendous display. And it's like, well, yeah, Sean Hockley, what a surprise, that he's leading the charge in a 30 penalty game. But at the same time, penalties were called both ways, equally, both bad probably at times. Didn't affect the outcome of the game. It just made the game hard to watch. That was my thought. But they just got to address that, because I just think, like, I think we all can agree that 28 penalties is just not good for business.
It's not, but what do you do if...
No, you're right. What do you do?
Commit penalties,
Yeah, it's kind of like, Ohio State jumped off sides and had false starts all over the place. They had like 7 of them today. What are you supposed to do? Not call those? I understand that. Sometimes you're going to get called for a lot of penalties. But some of them, I don't know. It's close. It's just close. I don't know. It's tough to decide on that one. All right, last college nugget, and then we're going to move on. A lot of steam on the Lincoln Riley to LSU stuff. Ryan was pretty upfront that was a done deal 2 weeks ago on the pod. I think Ryan's looking right on that one. The rumors seem to be getting closer and closer on that, don't you think?
I agree, but I do want to point out that 2 weeks ago it was Ryan apologizing to me because I said it was going to happen.
That's right. Let me correct the record. You said weeks ago, and actually you and I both said it, right? I feel like, but you and I talked about it, that we thought Lincoln Riley to LSU made a lot of sense, that you had to call Lincoln Riley and be told no. Same thing, like you had to call Herb and be told no. It seems like that's I feel like it's a done deal. It seems like it's a done deal. We'll see if it officially happens, but all the steam is pointing that way. And it's a good get for LSU, I would assume. Although he still can't coach defense.
They did have an interception now.
They did, yeah, that's fair. So maybe
the
there's
pod
something.
has started, they have made one stop.
It's already that SEC influence hitting Lincoln Riley. He's like, hey, look, we can coach defense too. It's weird. Unbelievable. Although they have, like I said, there's 24 points that have been given up by Oklahoma in the first half.
The Big 12 continues to not do much.
Ugh. And everybody wonders why they're leaving. It's weird. So Lincoln Riley, that looks done. Does that get LSU back, or are you in on that hire? Do you like it if that's the case? If that's who they go get?
I do. The LSU job is such a weird job because I don't think that a lot of people consider them to be a year-to-year powerhouse.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But you look back, and Saban won a national championship there. Les Miles won a national championship there. Coach O won a national championship there. There's a lot of success there for coaches through the years. And so I don't know, can somebody sustain that level there? I'm not sure, especially in that conference, but I do think it's a good job.
There's the expectations there that they're going to be good every year. That's the whole thing, right? The fans, the fan base, the boosters, whatever, have the expectation that they're a blue blood. You're right. I don't think of them like a blue blood, but maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm thinking the wrong way on that one. But I don't know. I think the Florida job, although I'm told by some people that the facilities comparison between Florida and LSU is not close. Like LSU is way more desirable, but you feel like Florida is the more desirable of the two jobs. But maybe that's where I'm wrong.
I think that Florida is a little further off right now. And I think we touched on this before, but what is that new conference going to look like when Texas and Oklahoma come?
Yeah.
Because the rumor is that if they just split it geographically, it's going to put Auburn and Bama into the East with Florida and Georgia. Well, now, Florida is what, the third or fourth best job in that division.
Yeah.
Right? And then LSU gets to stay on the other side, and yeah, they have Texas and Oklahoma, but those teams are not.
Yeah, and Missouri and Texas A&M, who cares?
Right. And so I would rather be. I think what it ends up doing is it really loads up the one side. Now, there are conversations too that they might go to four pods, and then have it rotate who plays who from each pod, and so we'll see how that all plays out. But if it plays out with just a geographic split, then man, I would much rather be at LSU than Florida.
And nobody takes the Vanderbilt job for the rest of eternity, right? Nobody wants that. That's now a graveyard officially. Like nobody will ever win at Vanderbilt.
Yeah, and I don't know how long does Vanderbilt stay there.
You don't think? Well, I mean, why leave though if you're Vanderbilt? You'd rather be a doormat in the greatest conference, wouldn't you? I mean, if you went to the AAC or something, that's no good. You don't want to do that.
I guess I know they're good in baseball.
Yeah.
But obviously baseball doesn't move the needle in college sports. My question would be, what's it doing to their other sports? Is there a better fit for basketball?
Yeah, Jerry Stackhouse is not getting it done there as the coach. Like that has not been good so far. I think
and so I don't know. And just if you're always going to get blown out in football, and it's not going to get any better, right?
No, yeah, we don't know. I mean, and that's the thing. I'm just looking around at them and I'm like, Jesus Christ, like even Rutgers went 5-7 this year. It's like this team can't get a sniff. Like they can't get on a run. Even Kentucky pops occasionally. It's like, what the hell?
Vanderbilt is like Kansas in a way better conference.
That's true. Yeah,
right?
Kansas is thrilled that Oklahoma and Texas are leaving. They're going to be great in a couple years.
Well, let's
not cut. Let's not. Let's talk NFL football. That's what this whole pod's about. We just did 15 minutes of college, and Ryan's not here. Ryan loves college football, and he's not here to talk about it. Oh, what a shame. What a shame. Let's talk pro football. Last week was a kind of a bloodbath for the top of the power rankings. It further proves my point that nobody's good in this league, or at least nobody's great. Do you still feel that way, or did some teams step up and maybe they're in the conversation?
I don't know if you have anybody that's great. Like we've talked about, there's good teams. I think we know who the good teams are. I think we know that there's a few teams that are going to make the playoffs that are pretenders, especially now with that 7th playoff team. It still sticks in my craw, but
there's going to be 8 soon. You're going to get up to 8 before we're all said and done here.
Yeah. And so anyway, they are... There's nobody that's great, right? I mean, there's some good teams. It's a long season. That extra game is not going to help too. Like, look at all the injuries that we already have.
Yep.
And it's just going to continue.
And I was reading Shannon Sharp talked about this on Twitter this week about all those injuries. He just feels like teams don't hit enough in practice now, and because they don't hit enough in practice, we got way more like soft tissue, muscle pulls, hamstring, those kinds of things that just. And I'm trying to figure out if those two correlate. And I guess I ask you, the football coach, does that correlate, do you think? Like, if they're not hitting enough, that's a problem?
I don't know about that.
Because you come from a school where they don't hit at all in practice.
Right. And they were doing that for years before it was trendy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ways to skin this cat and talk about some of the injuries. I think part of the problem is guys are bigger and faster and stronger than the human body was ever really intended. Right. So they're pushing those muscles, those joints to the limit, and then they're playing football.
Right.
And I think that's part of the problem.
So it's just a physical breakdown after a certain point, especially if you're one of these hotshot wide receivers and you make 7, 8, 9, 10 juke moves. Eventually, like the body's like, whoa, hang on, like I'm not set up to go that way. And that's it. And then they're out.
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. And that's, we're also getting, we're getting to the point too with like the fields and stuff. Like some of these fields, like we talk about Washington, we talk about the Bears field at Soldier Field. Like there's some questionable fields at this point.
I do think that they have to get to a place where I know some people are big natural grass proponents. I happen to be a big field turf proponent just because I feel like it's consistent and give me the consistent surface day in and day out. But they've got to do something to regulate that across the league. Like the NFL's got to say like the grass has to be able to do X, Y, and Z, or the field turf has to do X, Y, and Z, or there has to be some sort of inspection of these conditions more often. I would think you're right. I mean, it seems like there's a graveyard every couple of weeks where it's like it's either in Washington or it's in Carolina or it's in Chicago. A lot of guys getting hurt week after week, and starting to see it now in places like San Francisco. People have talked about that field as a disaster, and it feels like it is because San Francisco's got everybody hurt every year.
Yeah. So I don't know if the NFL. I mean, I would assume there is a process for this, right?
You would think. You would think there's a system.
The weird thing, to me, is when you go to Chicago at this time of year and in December, there's not even grass anymore.
No, it's just dirt.
They just spray paint the dirt green. Which I don't understand because in Green Bay, it does get beat up, but it's not as bad as Chicago.
Well, I feel like you guys are resodding the field all the time. They always talk about, they resodded the entire field today with the heat coils and it's settled and...
Yeah, and they have lamps, so it's basically... I didn't know what it was the first time I saw it because they had it out at the practice field. But it's basically we see those giant sprinklers in a field here in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Right? That kind of over the top.
Yeah.
Well, they have that except for it's got lamps hanging from it. And it's just to pump in and grow grass. So they wheel those things out over the grass all the time so that it can grow grass in the middle of the winter when it gets, dark out at 4 o'clock here.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a big as much as I like conditions, I like mud and stuff like that. Sometimes that's all right. That's kind of old school football. There's a little part of me that's after watching our football teams this year have a chance to play on field turf, I was kind of I think I'm kind of in on this. I'm in on consistent field conditions all the time.
Well, your high school had some of the worst field conditions around.
No question about it.
The lawnmower was broken every time you go play there.
We absolutely had the worst field in the state of Minnesota. I think that's part of the reason why we got turf is because we let our field get so bad that we were able to get that approved. I think that was kind of how we got it done at the end. That's good politics right there. That's really good business. So the NFL, we have this big issue with injuries. We have this big issue with attrition. We have this big issue with teams not necessarily being great, but within that, I guess we're starting to see some teams bubble. I guess if there was anything I took away from last week, I took away that New England looks to be pretty good, and now all of a sudden has moved themselves into contender territory here. And I've also seen it looks like the Chiefs have sort of figured it out, haven't they?
The Chiefs are better than they were. I don't know if I would call the Patriots a contender yet. I think they're a contender to win their division, but I don't know beyond that. Do you trust Mac Jones enough for that yet?
Well, yeah, that's a fair question, although he is delivering Maction. That is the new Maction as far as I'm concerned. I like seeing him. I think he's getting better week after week. The thing I like about him is he's efficient. He doesn't...
I like their defense.
Yeah, right? I like their defense too. Defense is good. Yeah, and they make enough plays on special teams. They get a kick return. They get a fumble. And they kick field goals, and they don't miss a lot of stuff. But even Mac Jones, every game he finishes, 21 of 25 for 225 and 2. And it's if you're going to throw 4 incompletions all game, we're going to win a lot of games. At least I feel that.
Yeah. And so I think, they're a playoff team. I think they're going to win the division, right? I would kind of hype that up last week. I'm ready for it. I'm rooting for it.
Me too.
They are 5-0 on the road.
They are. And they've beaten some
remarkable.
teams. Yeah.
And I don't think there'll be an easy outcome playoff time, but I just don't think I'm ready to say this is a team I consider a factor yet in the AFC Championship.
Let me ask you about a couple of the games that happened already this week. Let's just stay with Buffalo for a second. They waxed New Orleans. I'm not ready to say Buffalo's back, but that was clearly the best they've looked in a while, in a few weeks. A good bounce-back game after a really disappointing home loss. But I guess I'm stuck with New Orleans here a little bit. I'm a little concerned that they have a record that keeps them in it, but they feel like they're dead in the water now that they don't have Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill's hurt. Yeah,
they've been atrocious on offense. So I think they're in trouble. I think Buffalo's in trouble too. We were texting a little bit during that game. I said, hey, they're going to win this game. They're fine here. But Josh Allen has not been good.
He wasn't good in that. Even in that first half, they were ahead. You're right, but he wasn't great. He made a lot of mistakes.
And I worry same thing about them come playoff time. Hey, they're just not playing well, right? I mean, Diggs has been a non-factor for the most part. I mean, he got a touchdown this week, but he has not been what he was. And so I think New England's going to win that division. And, you know, they've got they play head-to-head twice coming up, right? Yep. So that'll be the big piece of it. But I like New England better than I like Buffalo right now.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you on that one. Bears beat the Lions. That's not really headline news or anything. A lot of it was made about Nagy potentially being fired after the game. Now, obviously, I think they can't go back on that, or they can't fire him now that they've come out and said there's nothing to it, and they won the game. But I don't know. I guess I'm trying to decide if I buy that report that they were going to fire him, or if I don't. But I guess at this point you can't fire him now, can you?
No, and like I said, it came from that.
Whatever the hell that was.
Online newspaper, The Patch. I don't give a lot of credibility to that. And here's the deal. They've never fired a coach in the middle of the season.
No.
After all this drama that just came out, I don't know that they're going to fire him this year either. And the problem has been they have a very bad offensive identity right now. They don't have rhyme or reason. They don't have a plan at quarterback. They keep skipping around and they're not sure, and then one's hurt and then we're switching and I don't know. It just seems to be a mess, right? I don't think it gets any better by getting rid of the head coach this year.
No, it doesn't.
I don't think that there's anyone on the staff that you're like, this might be the guy. Like, we might keep the quarterback coach around to be the head coach. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. You need a wholesale change there. So they're not sticking around with any of those guys. So you may as well let Nagy finish it out.
I do buy the report that came out that said that McCaskey or whatever stepped in and kind of demanded that Justin Fields start. I sort of believe that story because, like I said, Nagy went from Dalton's the guy, Dalton's ready, Justin Fields is not ready, to Justin Fields is our everyday starter week in, week out, like really quickly. And I'm like, in the end, that's Nagy's fault one way or the other because, like, you got to have courage in your convictions a little bit as a coach. And I think what will do him in is indecisiveness. What will do him in is the fact that he never stuck to his guns on anything. But it feels like if it feels like this might be true, and if that's the case, I don't know who's jumping to go coach Chicago if you're going to have the ownership or the general management or somebody step in and say, no, the rookie has to start at quarterback, even though he's clearly not ready.
Well, I think the only difference, the only caveat that I give to ownership there is you may have gone, you know what, we're not going anywhere this year, and you're getting fired at the end of the year if you anyway.
Yeah.
Like, we're ready to move on from you anyway, so do this.
I kept forgetting because I thought Nagy was brought in same time as Trubisky, but Trubisky was there a year before they brought in Nagy. Like, they brought in Nagy to be the whisperer to Trubisky, and that's where this thing has gone off the rails. So, like, he couldn't whisper Trubisky. He couldn't win with Foles. Struggling with Fields now. Struggling with Dalton, although Dalton looked a lot better than Fields did. I mean, granted, they still only scored 16 points, so I'm not ready to get all crazy about this, but Dalton just looks like a far more professional quarterback at this point than Fields does.
Well, and I wonder if you could work a couple packages for Fields or a couple of – I don't know. We're not there. We don't see practice, so it's really hard to say what's going on. But that feels like it could be an approach.
Yeah. I think
like, hey, we're still going to get him in for some things. He also doesn't then have to maybe stress on the whole playbook. I don't know. It's a mess. It is that whole from top to bottom. I hope they hire Jason Garrett.
He is available. The Lions are interesting too. They're 0-10-1. I know, like, Ryan kind of likes Dan Campbell, and I don't necessarily hate Dan Campbell, but can you go 0-16-1 and keep your job?
I think we're gonna find out. Right? I mean, there's not many winnable games left for them.
I really thought this was a winnable game. I thought they had to get this game. They just had to.
Well, and I mean, they've been in some games, right?
They've been in a lot of games. They could have won a couple of games.
It took the big field goal against the Ravens. They were in a tight one with the Vikings. They tied the Steelers.
Should have beat the Steelers.
The Browns and the Bears. Those are all 3-point games.
Yeah.
I don't know. He
shouldn't be calling the plays. Like, the idea that he took over the play calling from Anthony Lynn or whatever, I'm like, yeah, listen, I'm seeing no improvement in that regard. So maybe give the play calling back to him. You focus on what you need to focus on, because there's not exactly a lot of wow, like, ooh, wow, he really knows how to move the chess pieces as a play caller. I'm not seeing that either.
Yeah, it could be, we look at their schedule. They've got the Vikings.
Yep.
At the Broncos. Cardinals. At the Falcons.
Okay, maybe the Falcons.
At the Seahawks.
Yeah.
And then they've got Green Bay at home.
I still think they can. Yeah, I guess they can get one of those, maybe two.
And it is possible that it comes down to the last weekend and Green Bay's not playing for anything.
It's true. That's true.
They could be already cemented as the 2 seed, or
especially if this Rodgers toe thing is going to continue to rear its ugly head, and they get a spot secured and they can sit him. They will.
Yep. Right. So I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it was a rough game to watch them. This is how much the Lions have to love the fact that they're the traditional Thanksgiving game, because, man, no matter what, people will watch that game. I kept watching. I could have not watched it, but I couldn't. I stayed with it the whole game. I stayed with it.
I'll tell you, I am not one of the people who complains about them being on. No,
I don't either. I don't mind it at all.
And
that means we're more likely to get
back
one.
On the history of it, right? They have it because the NFL said, "Hey, we want to play on Thanksgiving. Who will do it?" And everyone took a step backwards. And the Lions are like, "All right, we'll do it." Right? And so the NFL has rewarded them and continued to reward them because they said, "Hey, you were the team that was, willing to do it." And so now, we're going to keep giving it to you.
Yeah, and I love it because we play in their division, and so that means occasionally we get a Thanksgiving game. So I'm usually in on that. That usually means once every 5 years we're playing on Thanksgiving somewhere, and I kind of dig that.
Would you go or be interested in going to the game if they hosted one?
If the Vikings hosted a Thanksgiving game?
Yeah, if they get the Thursday night one.
Yeah, oh yeah, 100%. 100%. Because what are you doing afterward? Like, everything's done at like 4 o'clock.
Yeah, you're sitting around watching.
Yeah, you're sitting around watching TV, but by and large, that you've eaten the food. You've probably got the 35, 40-minute nap in, too, by then.
Yep.
So, you're good to go. It's a sleepy crowd. It might be a sleepier crowd, already drunk way before the game starts, but hey, I would still go.
That's pretty par for the course in Minnesota.
That's a Let's hang on a minute. Let's not start throwing rocks here from the drunken capital of the world here. Wisconsin's known to hold their liquor a little bit at the games as well.
I didn't say they weren't.
Yeah, but it just felt like you were a little condescending about the Vikings fans being a little drunk at the games.
No, I think it's a pretty common thing
to get
across many.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I would think so. That's the only thing that turns me off from football games is I could go to the game, pay a lot for parking, pay a lot for food, and have my time potentially ruined by drunken morons, or I can stay home and watch it.
We went to a Thursday night game in Green Bay once. It was Bears-Packers, and this Packer fan and Bear fan started getting into it, and they were both beyond drunk.
Of course.
And I, part of me was just like, it didn't affect me, but I was like, man, that guy's friends had to babysit him all game, right? All game. That would bug me even more.
Oh my God, yeah. How about being the designated driver in that crew? Yeah.
Right, being annoying is having to babysit the drunk guy at the game the whole time.
Yeah.
And I look back to it and I go, man, you paid how much for your ticket to not even be able to remember it?
I know.
To stumble around the whole game. I just don't get the enjoyment of that.
I can't understand it. I really don't. Nobody will ever convince me of that. I'll never figure it out. I'll never figure it out. It'll never make sense to me. We'll get into some previews of the games here in just a minute and see if you have any best bets. But I do want to run one more news piece by you because I do think it sets the table for an interesting storyline here in the next couple of years in the NFL. The St. Louis Rams, or the Rams, settled their lawsuit with the city of St. Louis for $790 million. That's pretty big. Plus, I've read some reports that the owner of the Rams, Stan Kroenke, has kind of wanted to stop paying for all the legal fees, and he's looking for the rest of the league to kind of help pay up on some of that stuff, which is not going to make the owner super thrilled. Expansion is coming to St. Louis at some point, we have to think, right?
I hope not. I hope there's not expansion again.
Yeah,
but it does feel like, I mean, if you're, I mean, it's just printing money, right?
Right.
Like, hey, $100 million, whatever, $1 billion, you can have a team, and people will pay it. I don't know if St. Louis is the right choice, right? I mean, how many teams are going to move out of St. Louis before you decide, hey, maybe we shouldn't put a team in St. Louis?
The St. Louis folks would argue, though, that they supported this team, that it wasn't their fault, and that the owner kind of strong-armed his way to California because there was more money in L.A.
But they didn't. I mean, they didn't fork over the money for the stadium.
It's true,
right? They came out with some half-baked plan to do a couple renovations, and it wasn't enough. And that's where I go. Here's the deal. If you want an NFL team, a baseball team, a football team, a basketball team, any sport, right? If you want a team, you're going to have to pay for stadium stuff.
A big-time nice stadium. Yep. You can't give them the Oakland Alameda Coliseum. Can't do it anymore.
Because how many stadiums have been built on the owner's dime? Not many.
Yeah, just Atlanta and maybe Dallas. Atlanta and Dallas.
I think Kroenke paid for LA, didn't he?
Yeah, I think he paid for a good chunk of SoFi. Yep.
But that's 3 stadiums across 4 sports, right? So you're either going to need to fork out the money with tax dollars, or you're going to need to sell stock.
Yeah.
And so that's why I go back to like the Green Bay thing being a good setup, because it's an optional tax to support and pay for things at the stadium that you're going to go use.
Yeah.
And so I rag on teams and people all the time. Like, I have a friend who's in Seattle, and he always is lamenting the loss of the Supersonics. And I'm like, you guys didn't build an arena, right? If you wanted to keep them, you should have built an arena. Because inevitably, all these teams, these cities then want an expansion team, and they spend 10 times as much on the expansion team as they would have to just keep their original team.
That's true. I mean, I know we get that in this town when we talk about when we talk about the North Stars leaving and stuff like that. But part of, and we ended up spending quite a bit more on XL when it was all done, than I think maybe we could have. The only arguments that I think are fair are when teams just leave early because of whatever, like the Vancouver Grizzlies bolted after 7 years or something like that. And that was not an arena thing or a stadium thing. That was just them bolting for a better deal thing. And, maybe that happens more in the NBA than it does in any other sport. But yeah, you're right. In the NFL, it seems like it always comes down to the stadium. And as long as the stadium is viable and functional, great. But until it's not, like we're seeing that in Buffalo right now, we're seeing that conversation. It happened in Oakland, and that's why they're in Las Vegas now. I mean, can't have this conversation forever.
Yeah, the stadium issue will always be one. The other thing, like with the NBA and the NHL, like they've expanded too much.
Yes,
there just aren't enough markets for those,
and there's not enough. Yeah, there's not enough good players.
Right, and so. And the way the NBA is set up, right? Like it's a huge disadvantage. I mean, Memphis is never going to be really good.
Yeah, I would agree.
I'm right. No free agents are going to go like, hey, let's go to Memphis.
Right.
And then the other part of it is you have these hockey teams in towns that are not hockey towns, right? And a lot of those are down south. and that's a problem. And then the other part is you have teams in that, right, for a while they had all these NHL teams in these tiny-ass towns.
Right.
And that doesn't work either. So the NFL is in a different spot because they are the golden goose right now, right?
And they have a revenue sharing plan that basically it doesn't matter if you're in Green Bay or Vegas or LA or New York. Right. Everybody's got money.
Right. And because of that, they've pushed so that there is some balance and all the teams are good or can be good.
Right.
But that's where like the NBA doesn't want that.
No, they don't. And MLB doesn't want that.
Right. As much as people have talked about it, right? Easy ways to fix that or to address it. The NBA is not going to address it because they don't want it, right? They want LA to be really good, right? They want their major markets to be the big teams. They want superstar teams to get together and play together. So will expansion come to the NFL? I think it will. I don't think it's the right move. There's not enough quarterbacks, first of all.
That's what I was going to say. We already have enough. We have a hard enough time. We had a weekend last week or 2 weeks ago where literally it was Tim Boyle and PJ Walker, and everybody, Mike White, you name it. We had a league where half the teams had quarterbacks that weren't any good.
The injury part of that, though, is fine, right? Like, those guys are backups. They're not starters.
But there's not enough depth in this league, though, right?
Right, but the problem is now if you expand, two of those guys are going to start.
Right.
Right? Two of them are going to be starters.
Right, absolutely.
I think maybe what it does is it opens up the possibility to teams approaching it differently, right? Like, I don't have the sling it all over quarterback, so I'm going to have a running quarterback more. I'm going to try to attack it differently. I don't know. Maybe that's possible. But I don't know. I think it's a mistake. The schedule is perfectly balanced right now, or it was at 16 games.
Right.
The 17th game also I don't like, but if there's money to be made, we know that those guys are after it, so...
My thought would be, I guess, before you start throwing the expansion around, I guess you would... Who's left to... Jacksonville, Buffalo have got to figure out their situations, stadium-wise, fan-wise. The Chargers situation in L.A. feels untenable, doesn't it? That you can't have 450 fans in the city, and that's basically what the Chargers have. How long is that tenable for them?
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Before you expand, I feel like you have to solve those three teams, don't you?
Yeah, right. Well, here's the deal. You have to, if you expand, it takes away the threat of a move to those new towns.
Right.
Right? Jacksonville only gets a stadium if they can threaten to move to St. Louis or San Diego or... I don't even know where else you would consider expanding.
That's a great question. Where else could you go? Like, you're not going into like a college market, right? I don't think you're going to be St. Louis, San Diego, Portland.
Yeah, Portland was on my possibles, but I don't,
That's about it though, right? Like, where else could you go? Like, you ain't going to fucking Little Rock.
I think you could have a tough time in some of those areas. I think the question is, could you run in San Antonio?
Yeah, that's it. Will Jerry Jones allow you to run in San Antonio?
Right. Well, that's part of it, right? Like, but that's the seventh biggest market in the United States, and there's no team there.
Right. So yeah,
right. San Diego is the eighth.
Yep.
So.
St. Louis, San Diego, San Antonio. Those would be the three. And Toronto, I guess, if Buffalo wanted to move north and go to Toronto.
That would be tricky, too, I think.
Yeah, well, especially in these COVID times. How could you possibly be consistent about getting them there? There's no way.
Right, because then after that, you're looking at cities. You got to go way down the list.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything there. Unless you go to Canada or Mexico or London, there's no options.
Oklahoma City?
I mean, do you think so? I mean, that's a college. I mean, I just say I don't know. I don't know if that's NFL time for me, but maybe it is. Maybe I don't know. But St. Louis, you feel like have put their, by winning that, getting that money, you feel like they might be ready to start throwing their hat back in the ring. You got to feel like they want a team quickly.
I mean, they could put a lot of that towards a stadium if they wanted to.
Yeah, get rid of that. You're going to go to the TWA Dome, or what used to be called the TWA Dome, for the Royal Rumble next month. You can tell me how it is when you get down there.
I will give you my full report on the stadium. So.
All the upgrades that they've made out there? Come on, you got to tell me all about it. Hey, do you got any big bets for us?
My bets for the week, if I'm gonna wager some money this week, I would look at the Vikings getting 3 points in San Francisco. I get they're on the road, and I get San Francisco's played better, but I just think Minnesota's been playing a lot better.
Right, it's two teams that have been playing well.
Yeah, so I think the +3 there, I would like. I would on Monday night. You've got Seattle and Washington, and two teams who are not playing well right now. And that's a pick 'em. So I lean towards Seattle in that. But I haven't done enough work on that one. So my best bet, I think, is the Vikings right now, as tough as that is to say.
That's fascinating because I think the Niners the last 2 weeks have kind of found a little something that works, right? They had an 18-play drive to open against the Rams. They had a 20-play drive to open against Jacksonville. They just seem like they're coming out in the first quarter and they're like, we're going to be really methodical and we're going to try to break the will of our opponent. And it seems like that's been a good recipe the last 2 weeks. They've kind of figured something out.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I just think, I mean, the way Minnesota's moved the ball and thrown the ball, and the Niners are not great against the pass right now.
Yes.
And I don't think, I mean, Minnesota has like the second fewest rushing touchdowns in the NFL.
Really? Wow.
I believe I heard that stat this week, which I thought was crazy. So.
And, I mean, if Minnesota wins this game, now the path to the playoffs starts to look pretty gettable, right?
This is the big one now.
Yeah. Because, I mean, they have a game with the Rams left, right? But other than that, the schedule's pretty straightforward. I mean, they got one more with Green Bay. They've got the Bears. They've got one more with the Lions. I mean, things are looking good.
Yeah. They can definitely get it done. Just a quick update on Bedlam, a little more defense. I know you're a big fan. We have a safety.
Safety. Both teams have decided to close the spigot at 24 points. They're going to start to take this game over defensively. Here comes Oklahoma. Oh, man. Other games to keep an eye on this weekend that I'm actually kind of excited about. Pittsburgh, Cincinnati. Kind of a loser leaves town. Not a loser leaves town, but kind of. In the sense that I think if Cincinnati can't beat Pittsburgh and put them kind of deep in the rearview mirror, I think that they'll rue the day. I think that'll come back to haunt them if they don't win that game. I'm interested to see the Eagles might be decent. They got to beat New York Giants to prove that, but I think they might be decent if they win that game. And your Colts, your Carson Wentz-led Colts, coming off the gigantic win, which you can yell at me about Jonathan Taylor in a minute if you want, because everybody else did in fantasy football this week. They play Tampa Bay at noon. I think a couple of big prove-it games for some of these teams.
For sure. And that, I mean, you didn't even mention, right? We talked Vikings, Niners.
Yep.
Rams, Packers.
Rams, Packers is big. Browns, Ravens.
And if you want to talk about the draft, which I'm sure Ryan is probably at home doing a mock right now.
Yeah, he woke up from a coma, just threw up and started doing a mock draft right now.
You've got Jets versus Texans.
Ooh.
Which will have all kinds of draft implications, I would assume.
That's true. It'll be the game of who tries to lose it, like who's throwing it away. Who's throwing it out of their own end zone at the end of the game, trying to get an extra safety.
And the thing is, you won't even be able to tell who's trying to tank because it's going to be Tyrod Taylor versus Zach Wilson. So
it's the perfect cover-up. It's the perfect crime, I tell you. Nobody will solve it. It's so good.
It's like Mark Madsen shooting 23s in a game.
Yeah, nobody thought the Wolves were tanking that game. No doubt about it. That's crazy. I'm fascinated by those games. I think that's going to be a really interesting test. Obviously, the Tampa Colts one is interesting because if the Colts win that game, with all the injuries in Tennessee, and Tennessee being on bye this week, chance to really make up some ground. The Colts have got some things in their hands right now if they can pull off another win.
And Tampa Bay has struggled.
Yeah, they got the win last week, but not perfect, right? Nowhere near perfect yet.
Right, and there's some questions going on there too. So I don't know. It'll be a fun week. It's always a good. I mean, NFL football is fun, right? We only get 18 weeks of these now.
Yep.
Used to be 17, but you get 18 weeks of these. And so that's kind of, we've had the conversation at my house, like, why are you watching Jets versus Texans on a Thursday night? I'm like, well, because we only get 16 weeks, or Thursday night
That's
games.
the one thing about the NFL. Like, every week is an event, and the off season is so long. I mean, it is a 6.5 month off season, basically. Like, it's a long off season to sit and think about it. The only one that's going to be longer is this baseball off season because they're going to be locked out here in about 3 weeks. So, which will give us plenty of time to chat about Hall of Fame stuff down the road. Let's eliminate somebody. It was I think it's high time, even with the win this week that we already knew. But heading into this week, we knew win or lose on Thursday night. We knew who we were going to take out of this thing, right?
Right. I think, we got another defensive touchdown now.
Wow.
Muffed punt recovered in the end zone by Oklahoma.
Wow. It is Bedlam. It's truly Bedlam at Bedlam.
Well, I feel like that might have been catch interference, but I don't know. We'll see. There's a replay coming. No, he just dropped it. So anyway, we agreed on the Bears before the game. We kind of had our little powwow and said, hey, we're not going till Saturday, but no matter what happens today, we're chopping the Bears. And even if they won, it's not like they were like, oh, damn, like they put it together.
Yeah.
Right? That it would have given us pause or second thought. So
up until the last second, of that game, we were, the Lions were beating them. So I felt even stronger in my conviction to eliminate the Bears at that point.
Yes.
They are not a good team. They are not going to but now things are going to start to get interesting after this week because there's a lot of teams that are sort of right in that middle ground of that, like that 4-7, 5-6, 6-5 range where you could kind of give or take on all of them. Next week, who we chop, I think, is a bit more of a discussion.
Oh, for sure. We'll see what happens with our Sunday games, and the Monday game is inconsequential because we've eliminated both of them. Correct?
Right, we have.
So, but I think you're gonna, we talked about the Saints, and I was like, no way 2 weeks ago, and now I'm like, yeah. Maybe.
Yeah, I don't see it. Like I don't see it with them, and I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about some teams that are good that have Denver. We haven't eliminated Denver yet, but we think Denver is a matter of time.
And that was my other one. I was gonna say if they get beat by the Chargers, it might be time to stick a fork in them as well.
Yeah, so we're starting to move our way. I mean, and even this Niners-Vikings game, not that you want to eliminate either team with a loss, but at the same time, that road, especially for San Francisco, gets really tough if they lose. Gets really difficult.
Right. And at some point, it's not necessarily the games back that you are. It's the number of teams in between you.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Because you need all of those teams to lose to make up the ground.
And that's where it's starting to look a little tougher for a team like San Francisco, why they absolutely have to win this game this week. Because you don't want to have to start leapfrogging the Vikings and the Rams and the Cardinals and all these other teams that you don't have a tiebreaker with. Like, that's curtains. It's a recipe for disaster. There's no way they come back. All right.
Correct.
So, Bears, you're out. Off to the Eliminator you go. Congratulations to you. We have lovely parting gifts backstage, a Cuisinart, a toaster, various things like that. Congratulations to you. We now move to the Tito Santana Award for last week. That's the team, again, the underdog, the team that the enhancement talent, if you will, that gives a hell of a game to the favorite before finally putting them over at the end. for whatever reason. Who's our Tito this week? We had some options, I think, right? Did we?
I've got the Steelers.
Yeah. Steelers played well.
They played well. I mean, they put up 27 points in the fourth quarter and lost, right? So they kind of had that furious comeback. You're starting to believe, and then they slip on the banana peel.
Yep, the salt in the eyes. Somebody grabbed a handful of tights at the Justin Herbert with a handful of tights at the end of the match ends up getting the roll up in the win. Ref didn't see it. I'll say this though. You watch the quarterbacks in this league, and you start to go like, "Oh, that's why the Steelers won't get rid of Ben Roethlisberger." Like it's literally that the path. Unless you've got a guy behind you, and it's clear they know they don't have a guy behind Ben. You don't want to give it up as long as you got it.
Maybe they should go out and get Colt McCoy this offseason.
Maybe so. He's kept him. Give Colt McCoy credit. He's done exactly what he needed to do.
35 for 44 for 328 yards and 2 touchdowns this week.
That's pretty good.
Yep.
I don't count on Colt McCoy weekly, but that was pretty big. I'll give him that. I'll give him that. That was a big one.
Did you know Colt McCoy was still in the league?
I did not.
4 weeks ago?
I did not. I thought he was done. I thought it was Chris Trevor time.
I would have been the same way. If you would asked me and said, "Is Colt McCoy playing or not?" I would have gone, no. And I would have been wrong.
That's a new segment for next year. Right before week 1, we should say still playing or not. And just find a list of guys and see if they're still playing. Colt McCoy would have been on that list of guys that we would have thought, no, him and Chris Fuamatu-Ma'afala. There's no way those two guys are still playing anymore. No way. I think Chris Fuamatu-Ma'afala doesn't play anymore. I think he's done now. But Colt McCoy is still playing. That is a surprise. Colt McCoy having a longer career than Vince Young or Robert Griffin III. Got to be surprised by that a little bit.
I mean, he was the big guy out of Texas, right? I mean, he had the name coming out.
He did, but didn't have the. Nobody thought he was starter caliber. No. Okay, let's get to the power rankings. It's been a good pod here, you and I bantering back and forth for the hour. I've enjoyed this very much. Power rankings didn't change much because everybody lost, right? But I have a couple of changes. But I'll let you go first. Who's number 5?
Well, my 5th team this week is still going to be, I think I had Baltimore at 5 last week. I might have had them at 4. I can't recall. But Baltimore's my 5th team. They're going to be a tough out over there. Tennessee is falling. So I feel like Baltimore is primed to slide up into the 1 seed, and home field and a bye for them would be huge.
Mm-hmm. I have New England here. I'm going to put New England here into the countdown. I guess I'm buying. I'm buying Mac Jones. I'm buying Bill Belichick right now, late in the season. I think there's an expression that might be Belichick's expression. I'm not sure who came up with it, but it's like fast teams slow down, but power teams stay. Can still be powerful late in the season. And you start to look at the things they do well are the power things, right? Because I think he's right about that. Like these speed finesse teams, they slow down. They get hurt. They get nicked up. They're not what they were. Power teams seem to be the ones that come to the forefront at the end of the season. And we saw that today in college football. And I think we might see that in the NFL too. And if that's the case, you kind of got to like the Patriots. So I'm going to have them at 5.
Yeah, I like that same too. I mean, at this point in the season, you are so banged up. It is tough. It is really tough. I mean, I remember back to my playing days, and that's nothing compared to a pro season, right? And I know how sore and banged up we were after a short season, relatively speaking. So, my 4th team, I have the Rams here. Big game this week with Green Bay. And the tough thing now for the Rams, though, I mean, the Rams are kind of getting to do or die time here, right? I mean, if they lose, they're going to fall 2+ games back of Arizona in the division, and now they're looking at 3 road games to get to the Super Bowl with a guy who hasn't won a game in the playoffs yet at quarterback. We talked about that before, so the must-win game for the Rams.
I agree. I think so. The Rams kind of feel like a team that, you hear about something on the menu, like there's a dish that's been put on the menu, and you're like, there's like one too many ingredients in here. Like, I'm tasting one too many things, and it's weird for the palate. Like, it all sounds good, but it's too much, right? Like, I love all of these ingredients individually, but together it's not a good thing. That's what this starts to feel like. Like, you add a Von Miller, you add an OBJ, you just start to run out of. I don't know if all these pieces are going to gel together in time, and I'm a little concerned about that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think that at a certain point, you don't need all of those things, right? There's only one football, so I think that's fair.
Number 4 for me, I'm going to take Kansas City. I'm buying the comeback a little bit here. They've put together some wins. They beat. Now, granted, it was an Aaron Rodgers-less Packers team, but you don't have to apologize for that. You just got to win those games. They've won, I think, 3 in a row, 4 in a row. They're starting to win in the manner that we had kind of gotten used to, where they could get points quick, they could get a lead, they could stay in front, or when they at least got to a place in the game, you're like, there's no way they're losing this game. You're starting to get there a little bit. It's not perfect, but it's getting closer to what it was.
Yeah, my concern there is they're so far back in all the tiebreakers right now.
Right. All those games early on were killers.
You know, they're 2-4 in the conference. They're 1-1 in the division. So,
but everybody in their division fell back. That's why I think in the end they're still going to win their division, because you feel like the Chargers came back, the Raiders came back.
The problem though is are they going to be as good on the road in the playoffs? Right. They might get the first one at home.
Yep.
But if they're right now, round 2 would be in Tennessee, and then they'd have to go to Baltimore. And, we know that stuff's going to shuffle here a little bit, but they could have to go to Buffalo. They could have to go to New England.
Yeah, all of the teams that could host playoff games are in cold weather cities in the AFC. Like, right. or outdoors. No dome games, no fast tracks.
They're all outdoor teams, period, in cold weather.
Yep.
They're going to make the playoffs as of right now, except for the Chargers.
That's right.
But it's Tennessee, Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City, New England, Cincinnati. That's
true. Now that you mention that, yeah, there's not. But that's the track of, like, even Kansas City plays outdoors in the winter, so it's not like they can't play on a fast track in the it's not like they can't do that because they've done it already. But it just, I don't know. Yeah, you like putting your money on teams that are going to play in, especially when they're a fast finesse team. You want them to be able to play on fast tracks. I don't know if they're going to be able to do that. So it's going to be interesting to see. I'm interested in that. Number 3 for you.
My third team is Tampa Bay. We talked about it. They picked up a win this week. They've got some stuff going on, I think, a little bit that they need to figure out, but we're going to learn a lot this weekend with their game against the Colts, right? I think if Tampa Bay is going to be who I think they are and who they can be, this is one they got to go win.
Yeah, I have Tampa here too. I've Dallas and Tennessee dropped out of my rankings, and I think it's just the injuries I feel like are a thing. Like losing Derrick Henry, they were able to get away with it for a couple weeks. You're starting to look around going like, yeah, they kind of need Derrick Henry. Like, they really do. Like, Ryan Tannehill can't win them 5 games. Like, he can win them a game, maybe 2 games, but I don't know if he can win a bunch of games. And now A.J. Brown's got moved to IR. There's just not a lot of weapons there right now.
I think they're a team that if we were doing midseason grades now, we'd be looking at an incomplete because we just don't know because of so many injuries now.
You're right. It's just so hard to figure out, but we can't possibly in good conscience say they're a top 5 team just based on what we know.
And just back to the Buccaneers here, who we're actually talking about here as our third pick.
Yep.
Their schedule is real soft after this.
Yeah. Chance to get fat here.
They've got Falcons. They host the Bills, which should be a good game. But then they've got, Saints, Panthers, Jets, Panthers. So they have a chance here to win several games and really pad themselves heading into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they're going to go on a run here. I feel good about them figuring it out. Now, they got to get healthy, too. Tampa's got a lot of injuries, and clearly their concern is, can we keep Gronk healthy? Can we get Sherman back on? Can we get any of our secondary guys back on the field? Vita Vea had the injury. I mean, they've got some things they're worried about. They need to get healthy, but yeah, right now I have to at least call them the 3 because they've got Tom Brady, and as long as they got him, they're in it, I think. So number 2.
2, I've got the Cardinals.
Same.
With wins, with their backup quarterback, they've shown that they can do some stuff here. I still worry about them if they can win the division. I think that the Rams are going to win the division.
Really?
To be honest. But Arizona's proved me wrong, right? I ragged on them early in the year. They've done enough now where they've got my respect. We'll see if they can hang on to it, but they're my 2 team.
I'm with you there. I have Arizona as my 2 as well. They've weathered this Kyler Murray storm, and maybe this is the best thing. Like, instead of having a nicked-up Kyler Murray playing every week, they were able to milk like a mini – they were able to get a month and only drop 1 game. I mean, that was pretty big. And maybe that gets him fresh legs for the end. And, they've proven that if Kyler's healthy and they're at full speed, they're a really tough team to deal with offensively. So it's not a team I want to play in the playoffs. It's really not. So that's one to keep an eye on. And obviously that means our number 1 teams are still the same.
Yep, I have Green Bay still.
Same here.
I thought that the loss to Minnesota, Minnesota always plays them tough, right? Yep. Zim gives them trouble. The question for Green Bay really is the injuries right now.
The Rodgers injury first, right? First and foremost.
And that sounds like that, just from talking to and hearing from some of the doctors and stuff. It's this pinky toe.
Yeah, he was nice enough to put that up on the desk in a Zoom call this week, so everybody got a chance to take a look at that, which that was a meme, insta-meme this week.
Rex Ryan loved that.
I wasn't even going to do it. You did.
But the thing is, right, is with that type of an injury, they can numb it and go.
Right.
Right? And that's where, right, like, some people were freaking out about Rodgers off to the locker room early in the Vikings game at half.
Yeah. I didn't know about the toe injury at first. Like, I didn't know about that. Like, I thought he was just doing it.
To get the toe addressed, right? He got that numbed up again, and he came out a house of fire.
Yeah, he played really well. But, I was going to say, for a guy who can't run, he played pretty darn well.
The pinky toe is not a huge piece to what you have to do as an NFL quarterback, right? So you can numb it up and go, and yeah, if it gets hit or it gets stepped on,
yeah, that
was part of it too, right? And that hurts or whatever. But and it sounds like these other guys are going to come back, right? Jair Alexander is working out at practice. Bakhtiari had his knee cleaned up. They expect him back probably after the bye week now. But their injuries have been mounting, and they've got another tough game this week against the Rams, which, you know what, if the Rams come in and win, I will not be shocked.
No.
I obviously I'm hoping that they don't as a Packer fan and owner, but it would not shock me. But I do think that Green Bay will be set up for a good run if those guys are coming back, right? And
getting the late bye now is kind of a thing. It's kind of an advantage now, right? With the 17th game, like getting the latest possible bye you can get feels like kind of a plus now.
Right. The late bye has become a big. I mean, it was even last year, right? The late bye, Tampa Bay, they took it and they were off, and I think that is what you would prefer. There was a couple years where Green Bay had it like week 4, week 5, and it would just drive me nuts. So it's another week to get healthy, to regroup, and then like you said, I mean, maybe their spot is settled by the time the playoffs roll around, a week early, and they get another chance to rest some guys.
And they're banking on that. And good news for them is that if they can get 2 to 3 more wins here in the next couple weeks and kind of get some distance between them and Dallas and get them, and everybody, I think they can kind of run and hide, catch up with Arizona, stay with Arizona at least, but you have the tiebreaker over them and just kind of run and hide and get to the end. I think, Green Bay looks good for it right now. I like it. I still think they're the best team in the league. I agree with you. See, I can agree. I can agree with you on Green Bay. Come on now.
It took a while for us to get there, but
well, come on.
I'm
here.
I just as we wrap up here, and I know we started college football heavy, but Oklahoma's starting to pull away here from Oklahoma State, and that means that the Notre Dame dream is still alive. And I cannot wait to just see everyone melt down when Notre Dame gets in.
I still think they shouldn't get in over Cincinnati if Cincinnati's still there with an undefeated record at the end.
No, but Cincinnati will be in.
Cincinnati will be in. Okay. You're thinking that if Georgia beats Alabama.
If Georgia beats Alabama, then Alabama is out.
They're out.
And right now your 4 teams. So assuming that happens and Alabama's out, we're going to end up with Georgia, Cincinnati,
Michigan probably if Michigan beats Iowa,
and Notre Dame.
Wow.
And that's a little bit. I mean,
chef's kiss on that one.
Guess what? Michigan could lose to Iowa.
Yeah, they could. They absolutely could.
I think Michigan's better, but there's going to be a letdown possible next week. And Iowa just wins games. They've been not good on offense, but man,
they're gutty.
They're pretty good defensively, and they don't turn it over, and they found ways to win games.
And if you're Oklahoma, you got to be sitting there going like, hey, what the hell do we got to do? If we beat Oklahoma State twice in 2 weeks and we're 12-1, like,
yeah, but the problem for Oklahoma, in my opinion, is right. They have the one loss, and the loss is not a killer.
No,
but remember, they were not showing a lot of respect early.
No, they weren't.
Right,
people didn't think they were good before.
Right. Even if they were undefeated and they were still sitting at 9.
Right.
They lost to Baylor, and Baylor's okay, but they played a nip and tuck game with Texas, who's not good, and they trailed Kansas at half.
Yeah, they were in a war with Kansas.
Right? I mean, would you take Anoka High School or Kansas in a game? So I almost feel like that win hurt them.
It was a bad win.
It's a bad win. And so I think if you go back and look at it from the other side, and I know people are going to hate it because Notre Dame has been blown out in the playoff a couple times, right? That's all everyone ever wants to talk about is how they lost in there. But Notre Dame, they beat Wisconsin, who will probably fall now in the rankings. But their only loss is to Cincinnati.
Yep.
And they have been blowing teams out. They're up 24-0 right now. This is their 4th game in November. They have not given up a touchdown in November.
Right. And they've played some teams like Purdue is going to be an 8-win team. And I think they played Purdue, right? Then they played them early in there. Beat Purdue, and that's an 8-win team. Like, and yeah, I get it. These aren't world-beating teams, but you beat enough 8, 9, 7-win teams. Like, you're not playing a bad schedule. Like, you're playing good teams. Stanford is maybe the worst of the teams that they've played, and they waxed.
Right. And they beat Georgia Tech last week 55-0.
Right.
Okay. Georgia beat them today 45-0, I think. They pounded Virginia 28-3. They beat Navy 34-6. Right. That's all in the last month. Right. So if they go through and they're not giving up, I just don't know how they don't get in.
I agree with you. We're gonna play this out next week. It's gonna be fun. I do enjoy that we have these 4 teams. I'd like 8, but I know you don't, and I understand why. Your logic is I can't argue with your logic on it.
I think this year even more to my point of like there are not 8 worthy teams.
If Cincinnati gets into the top 4 and you at least tell me that it's possible for a group of 5 to get in, because if they can't get in this year, I don't know what more Cincinnati can do. Like, I don't know what a group of 5 team can do if that's not good enough. And if that's not good enough, then we need to expand, because I can't have a world where they don't get in.
I think the rankings are going to come out this week, though, and they're going to be 4 again.
Yeah, that's probably true. Michigan will leapfrog, and Alabama will move up.
Michigan will go to 3, and Bama will go back to 2 for the week.
And you know what? If you want Cincy to be 4 and force them to play Georgia in the first, fine. That's fine. Whatever. Just let them play. That's what I'm. If I don't care. Like, I don't mind 1 versus 16s in the basketball tournament. It's like, oh, that's not fair. They got to get crushed by the number 1 team. But it's like, well, at least you get to play them. So if you're as good as you say, if you're as good as you think you are, go ahead and beat them, and then we'll talk.
Your Texas San Antonio, what are they? The Roadrunners?
I think they are.
Lost today.
Oh wow!
So their undefeated season is over.
Oof.
Because see, I heard you banging the drum for Cincinnati, but not for the.
I was banging it for Coastal Carolina last year too, though. I was banging. They need to play. You need. If you have told me that the regular season is the standard and that winning every game is the standard, then you have to reward that in some way. I'm just a believer in it.
They get rewarded with a nice bowl game.
And that's the thing. They go to the freaking Pinstripe Bowl or whatever. Like, who gives a shit about that? Nobody wants to go to the goddamn Pinstripe Bowl. Come on.
Oh, I can't wait for the college football bowl preview.
You and I will break it down. It'll be just all right. And the who's in the freaking Crypto.com bowl? I don't know. Who gives a shit? Nobody cares. Nobody's watching that.
I'm sure
game.
Ryan already has his bowl projections done.
Ryan, when you're back on the pod, we'll expect a full breakdown of the bowl preview when we get to it. But that'll be that. Hey, good pod, Zach. Go ahead.
It won't be the same taking cheap shots without taking cheap shots at Ryan, whether he's here or not. So.
Well, there wouldn't be a podcast if you didn't have the opportunity to do that. Do you want to take one more shot at him on the OSU thing before we go, or anything else you want to get out before we head out?
No, I think we covered most of it. It's been 728 days now since Ryan Day has beaten Michigan. You have to wonder if his job is on the line.
And it'll be over 1,000 by the time they play again.
Right.
That's
2 years in a row.
Wow.
Right, because last year they didn't play with COVID.
Yeah,
so,
that's right.
The one thing that's interesting that I did see, and I'll throw this out there, and then Ryan can defend it next week.
All right.
Larry Coker's first 3 years at Miami, 12-0 national championship, 12-1, 11-2.
Right.
Ryan Day's first year, he's 13-1, 7-1, 10-2. With other people's
seemingly with
players,
Herb's guys, right? Seemingly with Herb's guys.
Right. And I saw someone make that comparison earlier, and they took a lot of heat for it. And he came right back and said, "Hey, here it is." He's like, "I think that Ryan Day is Larry Coker," and people are like, "That's asinine." And then he posted, "It's like, oh, that's interesting, just to see how quickly Miami fell off, and when it's been a long time since Miami was relevant."
That's true. I mean, and I think that goes to Nebraska too, right? Like Frank Solich had 2-3 really good years after Tom Osborne stepped down at Nebraska, and then that kind of fell apart pretty quickly after. I don't know. I mean, Lincoln Riley has sort of proven he can hold it together, but yeah, I don't know if we've proven Ryan Day is a great coach yet. I don't know if we've proven that yet. I think the jury's out.
How good will Miami be if Lane goes there, though?
God, that would be. Well, Lane would become the prostitute of college football. If that's, I mean, just everybody can have a turn basically with the right price. It just feels. It feels like too many jobs. It feels like way too many jobs for Lane Kiffin. I'd like to see him stay at Miss and win there. Just do that.
I mean, he's 11-2.
He's done great there. He's done great, but he's been there 2 years or 3 years. Like, maybe stick it out a little bit.
I will say this, and I did like the point that it was Glenn Mason made it on the radio. He said, if you are offered a job and it's maybe a slight step up, he's like, you got to go take it because it resets your clock again.
No, it's true.
Right? With the way that college coaches are fired now.
Yeah.
He said you can go there and reset your clock and make that money again. He's like, you'd almost have to do it. You'd have to go places. And he said that's one of the things that he would do differently now.
Yeah, he would have left Minnesota 5 years earlier.
He would have left Minnesota and taken a job somewhere else and reset his clock so that he had the ability to keep going.
Yeah, that's true. And he probably should have. I mean, in hindsight, I mean, it would have been the best move for him. I agree.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't. We'd have to look back and see what jobs he was actually offered or rumored for, but
yeah, he was rumored for quite a few. I remember that for a while there, but yeah, we ended up staying because we were able to do enough, I guess. But
yep.
Good pod, Zach. Thanks for stepping in, gutting it out with us without Ryan tonight. We still went for an hour 20, you and me. That's pretty good attrition on your part. That's really well done. Want to continue to listen to our pod? Keep subscribing. Thank you. Another great month of folks listening in. Supporting the movie pod with Lauren, supporting our midterms pod was probably the most popular pod we've done in the history of this podcast, which is pretty incredible, actually. So I want to thank everybody for listening to that. That was great, and it's still available to you in the archive, also on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast, Spotify. Send me an email at timpodcast1@yahoo.com, facebook.com/timpodcast. I'm everywhere. Come find me, and it'll be great. So until next time, for Zach, this is Tim saying keep your head up, and we'll see you.
Welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket.